Hello and welcome to today's special pitch event and roundtable discussion focused on precision medicine and oncology. My name is Kyle Amdonoff and I'm delighted to be your host today along with Jim Mawson, founder, CEO, and editor-in-chief of Global Corporate Venturing. So welcome, Jim. I am also delighted to be accompanied by our panel of guest speakers and also judges for the pitch session we have prepared today, which includes Tara Bishop, founder of Ucb Ventures, Alicia Irusun-Lafitte, partner at Ucb Ventures, Oliver Kyon, Managing Director at Intuitive Ventures, David Stevenson, Managing Director of Merck Global Health Innovation Fund, and Lizzie Lee from McKesson Ventures. So big welcome to everyone, and I'm delighted to have all of them here for today's pitches and for today's discussion. So let's have a look at the agenda. A quick look at the agenda for today. First, I'm going to give a brief overview on some of the latest data on the life sciences sector, allowing in the meantime more delegates to sort of join in to watch us live. And this will be followed by the pitch session we have prepared for today, along with the UK's Department for International Trade, which will be followed by a roundtable and a Q&A discussion that will be led and moderated by Jim Mawson. I'd like to remind everyone that you may submit your questions via the questions in the chat function of Zoom. We will try to get back to them or to as many of them as time allows us to. With that said, before we start, I'd like to also give everyone a disclaimer that no part of this presentation is to be construed as investment advice in any shape or form whatsoever. The purpose of the session is purely informative. We also need to disclose the fact that Mawsonia, which is the holding company of GCV, is one of the limited partners in Ucb Ventures, the fund led by one of our guest speakers, Tara. A few words about us. We are a media company and we run two major online monthly business publications, Global Corporate Venturing, which, as its name rightly implies, is focused on corporate venture capital, and Global University Venturing, which is focused on innovation stemming from academia. In addition to that, there are other services which we provide and which we run, such as the GCV Institute, which offers training programs for up-and-coming CDCs, as well as the GCV Connect platform, which connects corporates and other investors and allows them to exchange deal flow, and of course our GCV Leadership Society, which aims to bring the corporate venturing community together. Now, as an organization, GCV is well known for the events and conferences we put together around the globe. And as most of you know, we already happily restarted in-person events with our GCVI Summit in Monterey in California, whose latest edition took place in September. And also our GCV London Symposium, whose latest edition was in November. Due to the emergence of the Omicron variant, however, we had to delay a bit this year's summit, which is now scheduled to take place on June 22nd and 23rd in Monterey, California. And our London Symposium is scheduled for May 18th and 19th. So do hurry up to pick your tickets if you haven't already done so. Now, because today's session is dedicated to the life sciences sector, let's have a brief look at some key data. So what happened on the corporate venture investing arena? The number of deals done by life sciences and health sort of related corporates were definitely up in both 2020 and 2021. And that was despite the initial shock of the pandemic, and perhaps that shock was a bit of a booster for some areas like telemedicine, for example, among others. And similarly, we also saw significant upward sort of momentum in the numbers of corporate exits, both in 2020 and 2021. This was admittedly due to the liquidity injections from central banks and buoyant M&A, as well as public markets that we saw. As for the corporate-backed deals in health startups, if we slice the data that way, it's very much a similar story with surging numbers, and we have reasons to believe that this has not been the case just because of the particular tailwinds that I just mentioned, but also because of exciting new developments and innovation that's taking place in this area. And hopefully the discussion panel led by Jim later on will shed more light on that. As I mentioned, today's startup pitches have been prepared in collaboration with the venture capital unit at the UK's Department for International Trade. Now, the unit itself is in its 10th year, as it was set up shortly after GCV was founded, incidentally. And the unit itself works with UK-based companies from across all sectors, typically ones seeking to raise £5 million or more in VC funding. And it works also with over 300 non-UK based investors across the globe, the bulk of them actually corporate VCs. And the VCU, as it's abbreviated, introduces those corporates just specific startups of interest, and it has supported over 3 billion of investment into the UK over the past 6 years. On top of that, its services are for free because it's backed by Her Majesty's government. So what I've done here on this slide is I have added two relevant contacts, Bob Dams, who is the life sciences startup Liaison, who has actually helped me select today's companies. So big shout out and thanks to Bob. And you can reach out to Bob, and the VCU has other specialists dedicated to other sectors as well. Just want to mention that in passing. And of course, Paul Morris, who is the liaison on CDC relationships, and he's had long-term involvement with GCV, supporting our events, our Energy Council, and the GCV Institute. So feel free to reach to them directly or through us. I would be happy to give an introduction. Now, we've also got the startups, of course, who will be pitching today. And I'm really excited to hear their pitches. Before that, I just want to briefly mention that I've left my email details on the bottom of the slide. So do please feel free to reach out if you need an introduction or anything. I am happy to oblige. Now, regarding the pitches, there will be each startup will have 5 minutes, which I will be timing. I will also give everyone a 1-minute warning, and then we will have 3 to 5 minutes for the Q&A for each startup. I strongly encourage the judges and panelists to ask questions, and in the spirit of fairness, we are going to see the startups pitch in alphabetical order by company name. The first one to present will be Dharmesh Mehta, who is Director of Business Development of CanCertain, which is a stratified medicine company. Dharmesh.
Great. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. I'm Dharmesh Mehta, one of the directors of CanCertain, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we're doing and why it's a game changer for cancer treatment. At CanCertain, we've developed a technique to optimize existing chemotherapy and immunotherapy drugs by testing them for effectiveness on a patient's own cancer cells outside of their body prior to treatment commencing. There are 3 main problems that we can help resolve. Up to 50% of first-line treatments fail. The cost of these failed treatments is a major cost burden to both the state and insurers. For example, in the USA, the cost of failed treatment is at least $49,000 per patient. Thirdly, the cost of developing new treatments is extremely expensive, mainly due to the cost of failed drugs needing to be covered and the cost of human trials once drugs reach that trial stage. We believe Cancertin is a solution to all of these problems. Using our 3D cell culture technology, we can test blood or tissue samples from patients and report back within 7 days, advising which drugs will work and which will be ineffective. Our trials at 3 NHS hospitals in the UK have shown Cancertin to be 90% successful in selecting effective treatments compared to the current pathway, which is about 45–50%. For pharma companies, we can apply our technology, not just to help test new drugs and reduce the human risk and cost, but also at the same time allow multiple variants of those drugs to be tested, which may have been disregarded previously. As you can see, the current pathway relies heavily on indicative biomarkers, and these can act as a guide at best. This is a case study of a patient that received treatment guided by a biomarker, which then failed. For the second line of treatment, she actually took our test and is now thankfully much better, and her tumor size has reduced. So the way the Cancertin process works is that once cancer has been diagnosed, a biopsy or a blood sample is taken by the hospital and sent to our lab in the UK. Those tumor or blood samples are then processed using our proprietary 3D scaffold, and 3D cancer cell cultures are grown and then tested with the treatment options inside the body, just without the patient suffering the side effects. A report is then produced and given to both the patient and their oncologist to make an informed treatment decision. On the third page of you can see that report and the effectiveness, which drugs are very effective, which are effective, and which would be rejected. The potential global market opportunity for Cancertin is huge. We can treat every single cancer patient with a solid tumor across the world in every market, and it's quite poignant for the developing world as well, where they may not have the resources to test, may not have the resources with all of the latest therapies, and therefore the narrow field of therapies they do have would need to become more efficient, so the more people can be treated with those limited resources. Currently, we are operating commercially in a few markets and negotiating with partners in others. The cost of Cancertin test costs $1,200 for a basic 5-panel test to $7,000 for a fully comprehensive test, all of which are well below the cost of the second line of treatment. And we're undertaking a funding round to enable us to fund the final stage of trials, allowing us to unlock the reimbursed markets and National Health Service markets, as well as expand our network globally to open up more labs. If any of you remember the movie Back to the Future, where Biff comes back with a sports almanac, the Cancertin test is that sports almanac. We play the game out and we'll tell you the result. Genomics can only give you odds, not the results. Thank you for listening. And if you'd like to be part of our journey, please get in touch.
All right. Then I guess we could open up the Q&A for Damesh and for Cancertin. Who would like to ask a question?
I'm happy to give it a start. I'm not sure I got it quite right about the actual business model you want to pursue with this 3D culture. Could you explain a little bit?
Yes. So what we're doing currently is we're working with self-pay patients in the markets that we're operating in. The plan is to fund the reimbursement study to be able to work directly with the NHS and health insurers globally to become part of their treatment pathway, so that they're saving money in the long run by not having that balance 45–50% of people going for a second line of treatment. So we want to become part of people's cancer journey and be part of the actual treatment pathway with the test. Does that clarify things?
And so your 3D culture, you need to do it at your own lab, right? You
correct.
Sell the plates.
Correct. Yes. So currently we have a lab in the UK, and samples are being flown in internationally. We're under negotiations with the partners in the UAE to set up a regional lab there. And the funding would then allow us to set up further regional labs and join with other partners across the world, basically, just to make the process a lot more efficient and quicker.
What is the next kind of funding round that you seem to be raising, if you want to clarify?
Yeah, so the next, yes, the next raise we're doing is 8 million, which would cover the cost of the 2-year study and the trials, and also fund the expansion of opening up labs in other regions. The Middle East, like I said, we're talking to people, and then following on from that, we're speaking to people in Brazil and the USA. And India. India would probably go to the UAE until the market grew sufficiently enough to have a regional lab there itself.
Right.
I had a quick follow-up question.
Go ahead, Dave. Go ahead.
The presentation here. I was curious if there are any specific clinical indications that you feel are, ripe opportunity that's, a deviation from standard of care or identification of the most appropriate treatment offers the most opportunity for clinical impact. And then maybe you could talk to validation as you think about some of these national healthcare systems and things, what your path for evidence generation is.
So that's what we were saying. We want to raise the money to get those validation studies done. At the same time, the scope is actually going backwards to pharma as well to help with their trials on drug development, where they could save potentially hundreds of millions, because they could test on real human cells outside of the human body, but get the reactions as if they were inside the body. We see that as a huge part of what we want to do.
Okay. Any other
Just
questions,
clarify
Dave?
for me. So it seemed like you were saying blood or tissue. Do you need
Correct.
blood and tissue? What do you need to run?
No,
these tests?
we need from blood, as long as the cancer is progressed with circulating tumor cells, we can extract those and then regrow those on the 3D scaffold. With tumor, sometimes if it's fresh, then we can take it, but we can work with the blood samples, and primarily we are working with blood.
Okay.
Okay. Then I guess we could move on to the next pitch. So next up is Professor Asif Ahmed, founder and executive chairman of Mirzyme.
Imagine a world free from chronic diseases. We prevent chronic disease before they happen. We prevent them in utero. We stop the molecular damage caused by preeclampsia and fetal growth restriction. We prevent low birth weight babies and downstream problems associated with it. We do this with one test and with one pill, and we save both the baby and the mother. I'm Asif Ahmed, CEO of Mirzyme Therapeutics. $40 million of non-dilutive competitive grant and angel investment has allowed us to develop a definitive diagnostic tool that has gone through a prospective study on a clinical group of patients, and a first-in-class drugs for cure. This research has resulted in 10 patents granted in 30 countries. The team's been working together for over 10 years, and we are 8 to 10 months away from IND and 18 months from phase 1 clinical trial for 2 of our 5 assets. Preeclampsia affects 1 in 12 women. It leads to high blood pressure and kidney damage in the mother and preterm birth in the baby. And there is no cure. Same is true for fetal growth restriction. There is no cure, although it affects 1 in 6 pregnancies. And both of these conditions lead to increased risk of death in later life. In preeclampsia case, women are 4 times at risk of getting heart disease or heart failure later in life, and twice as risk of getting stroke or dementia. And as you know, premature babies end up with long-term health problems. Preeclampsia is on the rise. Women are choosing to have profession in their 20s and babies in their 30s. And if you're a 35-year-old woman, your risk of getting preeclampsia increases by 4-fold. And as you know, obesity is on the rise. Women are having babies later, and people are getting heavier. Current management is inadequate. It results in bed rest, blood pressure medication, and even aspirin. These are ineffective, and there's nothing to prevent organ damage that occurs with preeclampsia. And there are no approved therapeutics available. And Myrzyme is bringing first-in-class drugs, which will be safe, effective, and hospital-free. So one more thing on this is that we are the only company which are using a stratified medicine approach. So with our 5 proprietary products, halfway through pregnancy, we can predict who is likely to get preeclampsia and then target the therapeutics, which is tailored to that biomarker-related disorder. And those that are not, are still high risk, but not in preeclampsia, will get treated with fetal growth restriction treatment. So in terms of stage of development, as I said, we've done a 500 patient prospective study with our diagnostic tool, and we are ready to do IND enabling studies at this stage. And innovation passport is under review with MHRA. I've been very fortunate that I have a fantastic team. I'm also the founder of Aston Medical School. Birmingham
1 minute, Asif.
Only city outside London to have 2 medical schools. And a number of the students who did my PhD with me are now in Myrzyme. And our board has regulators to legislators. We have an independent scientific advisory board led by Professor Smith, who was the former Dean of Imperial College. Having discovered 2 protective pathways to prevent preeclampsia and a medical school, I realized that to make this happen, we needed to do it in a company environment. That's how Myrzyme was set up. So let's take 1 test and 1 pill, and we can make preeclampsia history. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Asif. Just in time. We're finishing off here. Now let's open the Q&A for Myrzyme and Asif.
Thank you, Asif. Could you describe the risk stratification process a bit more?
Sure. So currently, the only thing you do is, it's like like driving in a car and halfway through pregnancy, the car crashes and you don't know. So when women go to, there is Roche have a rule out test. So there is soluble FLIT and PLGF. These are markers which have been shown to be able to give you some indication, but they don't tell you who's going to get it. They tell you who's not going to get it. Ours is a rule-in test. So we can predict with certainty definitively who will get it. So that's the first thing to say, halfway through pregnancy. And because we worked out the roadmap of the pathway, we've been able to dissect out using mouse model, genetically engineered mouse models and surgically applied pathways of ligating the uterine arteries. So work out what bits of it is involved. And therefore, we've been able to work out the markers, and the markers that we've shown with our therapy in the mice model do regulate. So that's how we would do risk stratification. So identify who's at risk, do a first test, do a decision tree, and then that will allow us to decide who should get treatment, who should not get treatment, and give them the option. Women should choose, and their obstetrician, obviously.
Asif, thank you for the presentation. Could you talk a little bit about the regulatory challenges of particularly studying these drugs in pregnancy? What has been done in terms of safety and ensuring that it's safe for both mom and baby?
That's a really, really important question. So you won't know, but I'm the person who did the world's first randomized controlled trial on statins in pregnancy. statins are category X drug, not allowed to be given to pregnant women. And I've not only done it, we did a multi-center study, we published it. So depends if you've got the work, the MHRA will give you approval to do things if you've got molecular mechanisms underlining it. So we've done that. So think of statins in a way. So statins were first approved for hypercholesterolemia. And then the pharma world went to them and said to FDA, we think we can, if we reduce cholesterol, we will save lives. And so they were given for a marker for cholesterol. In the same way, when we did the statin, we looked for a marker called soluble FLIT to see if it was really, and because that wasn't really, I abandoned them. In the meantime, we developed targeted therapeutics. So we have not just small molecules, which is an aspirin with hydrogen sulfide in it, but we also have microRNAs which directly bind to the 3' prime end of S-FLIT. So that's the approach we're taking. And the reason MHRA have allowed us to apply for this passport of that innovation. So regulatory approval will happen because, you know, we've done the due diligence. Obviously, the biggest risk is women taking the medication. But remember, this is something, a category X, this is not a category X drug. So we have mitigated as much risk as we can because, and I can't tell you more. I mean, till you do the experiment, you won't know, right? Till you do the randomized control trial, you won't know. But we're doing the tox studies and those kind of studies, and up till now, looks good. And then the last thing I would say, think of the vaccine. What is a vaccine? It's a foreign RNA in a soup that delivers a delivery system. And pregnant women have taken that. Now, we've already done that study. We have not published it, but we've done it and we've patented it, where we've given a microRNA in that soup, either with adenovirus or with liposomes. And so I'm very positive about that because the vaccine hasn't done it, all we're doing is raising endogenous levels of a microRNA that is deficient in women who have got preeclampsia. And we've done those studies as well. So it's integrating the whole thing. And I've been doing this for 20 years.
As if we've got a question from the audience, actually asking you to please expand on innovation passport being reviewed by MHRA.
Well, so when we went through Brexit, the UK government decided to bring in last year a new pathway, accelerated pathway. This is a pathway where MHRA help the company or the product take through the regulatory hurdles, and they negotiate on your behalf with NICE and other bodies. And so they will help you take you through this. Once you get NICE approval, then you have the NHS who will buy your product from you. So this is just, it's anyone can apply. I guess you have to have the meeting with them and then go and ask for a meeting, and you need to fill there are 3 criteria that you have to meet. We met all 3 of them, and that's why, which is about innovation. We're going into unmet medical need area, which is white space. So that's
right. Thank you. Moving on to the next pitch. So next up, we've got Pierre Sen, who is founder and CEO of Mersla.
You started, yes. Hi everyone, I'm founder and CEO of Mersla Limited, based in Cambridge, UK. I'm here today to walk you through our exosome biology, exosome characterization platform, and how we can use exosomes, which are secreted by cells, by habitually all cells, for applications such as liquid biopsy and cancer diagnostics. So, as you might know, some of you might know, liquid biopsy solutions are changing cancer management at the moment. So liquid biopsy is the ability to do tissue biopsy through the blood. So as you can see here on the left inside from the liver, if there's a tumor growing somewhere in your organ, the tumor will shed some information into the bloodstream. And those pieces of information could be retrieved and analyzed thanks to a broad draw. There are different types of pieces of information, from CTC to circulating DNA, exosomes, and other particles. And they allow four main things. The first one, obviously, is give us the ability for early cancer detection as a tumor is growing non-invasively. So you can start, screening and routing checks for patients. The other application for liquid biopsy is patient stratification. So you can look at the molecular signature of the tumor and try to guide the patient towards specific type of treatments. And once the treatments are selected, as you can see here, is the treatment will impact the tumor, and this tumor molecular signature can change over time, or the size can be reduced. And liquid biopsy can allow us to do treatment selection and response monitoring. And the last one, which is also very interesting, is what we call the minimal residual disease monitoring. So assuming there's a remission of the patient, he can go home. But obviously, we know the likelihood that another cancer, another tumor come back is quite high. So it can buy some peace of mind here. Now, having said that, the existing technologies today, they don't have enough predictive power for two main reasons. One is that we're still not sure yet exactly from which tissue this information is coming from. And the second piece is that most of the technology really focus on only a part of the information, namely genomics and epigenomics, which leads to overall a very low predictive power of the liquid biopsy solutions today. So exosomes, they can really provide the predictive power that is needed if we have the right technology. So as you can see here, tumor secretes, tumor-derived exosomes. We can look at them, and they contain two interesting things. One is they have a marker about the tissue of origin, so we can see which exosomes are coming from where, including the tumor or which tissue is coming from. And the second is they're really full of information. They contain lots of multi-omics information that mirror the parental cell, right? So, we at Mersla, we building a platform that can eventually unlock the exosome biology for liquid biopsy. A lot of public research groups are working on it. The field is booming, but yet they needed better technologies. So they can do two things. One is they can isolate tissue-specific exosome in plasma. We built also a platform for multi-omics cargo sequencing.
1 minute to go, Pierre.
Yes, and other important things like sensitivity, etc. So our first application is for liver cancer surveillance, which is a highly unmet clinical need. We have started our prospective pilot study in collaboration with UCL and IMM in Portugal and various other players. We are collecting samples as we speak, reaching almost 100 samples. We believe that this proof of concept, will help us to show that we can do that also for other types of cancer and other types of chronic diseases. So our team, the experience to bring this to market. I spend a lot of time helping clients to do that. We have a clear go-to-market strategy. So the key highlights, so we have a leading zone technology company in a booming field. We build a very specific platform.
And time's up.
Yes.
Sorry to cut you off. Time's up.
Almost there.
Yeah, almost. So let's move on to the Q&A. Let's see who's got the first question for Pierre. Alicia?
So, yes, thank you, Pierre, for the nice presentation. I know you can't really cover a lot in a few minutes, but could you tell us what has been, because I think exosomes, we know, are very rich in information. It's been known for a while, but what has been the bottleneck thus far to actually leverage them for proper liquid biopsy? What element of your technology here is making a difference versus the previous attempt?
Yeah, so there are several elements. The first one is that we can isolate and characterize tissue-specific exosomes as opposed to bulk exosomes, so all the exosomes. And as you know, probably 99+% are not relevant for the disease you're looking at. So that's really our ability to zoom into the organs, the tissue of interest. The second is the Multi-Omics sequencing platform. So, the groups, they always focus either on microRNA only, which has some limitations, or sometimes now a little bit more about proteomics, but nothing that put together proteomics and genomics and transcriptomics. So that's something, different. And the last piece, obviously, is the validation platform. So once you do sequencing is great, but you can't build this to clinic. So we build a validation, very sensitive validation assay that I can actually detect those pieces of information. And that's something that we just published, which is more sensitive, that about to publish. Yeah, three main things.
Right.
Pierre, do you have any initial data on sensitivity and specificity of your methodology versus gold standards?
Yeah, so we started the prospective pilot study. Now I can't say much more than this for now, but it's ongoing. Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, in which case we're going to move on to the next pitch. So up next, we are going to have Magda Blanco, who is Director of Strategy and Competitive Intelligence at Novalgen, which is an immuno-oncology company. Magda, please.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to present Novalgen to you. It is my pleasure to talk about Novalgen. Novalgen was founded in 2019 by globally renowned academic and serial entrepreneur, UCL professor Amit Nadwani. Novalgen is his latest company and follows his rapidly growing and 2020 US listed gene therapy company Freeline. In addition to founding Freeline, he's also behind two high-profile biotechnology licensing deals, both of these in the gene therapy space, one in hemophilia B gene therapy product that was licensed to Unicure, and the other one was a hemophilia A gene therapy product licensed to BioMarin. Novalgen, as mentioned, was founded in 2019 and is oncology focused, leveraging bispecific antibodies. Our first program is called NVG-111, and it entered the clinic last year, and we have already dosed 6 patients. It is a first-in-class bispecific T-cell engager targeting receptor tyrosine kinase like orphan receptor 1 or ROR1. This target is an exciting target as it should be capable of targeting more than 20 hard-to-treat cancers. But let me talk more about bispecifics first. Bispecific antibodies are an emerging popular class of therapeutics, and they are gaining popularity as they can interact with 2 different antigens at the same time and therefore facilitate targeting of multiple disease pathways simultaneously. The bispecifics market is predicted to reach $9 billion by 2030, and it is growing at an impressive 24 CAGR. It is truly an emerging therapeutic area, and there is currently only one approved product, namely blinatumomab, which is for ALL, and its sale is growing at a very good double-digit rate per annum. The pipeline of bispecific agents is large, with over 120 bispecifics in the clinic, and the majority of these in the oncology field. But Novalgen is the only one that targets ROR1. In biotech, it is very important to move fast, and we are proud of what has Novalgen achieved in only 3 years. The most important aspect is a rich pipeline. Our lead compound is Novalgen-111, and it has the potential to be a pipeline in a product, and it has a broad application in both liquid and solid tumors. We have also an undisclosed early pipeline that we are working on. In addition to us developing our first product, We also have built out an in-house protein engineering team who are developing new products and features for us. One of very such innovative features is our work to develop the ability to have self-regulating drugs. This feature would allow development of drugs that otherwise potentially would be too toxic to be effective. We have also built out a clinical team and have put in place a clinical strategy and all the documentation approvals needed to be able to start our clinical studies and have already started the patients, as I have already mentioned. Plus, we have put in place manufacturing capabilities, so we have clinical grade supply in readiness for our clinical study and are putting in place commercial supply plans. In addition to that, we have funding and have built a strong IP position. So let me tell you a little more about MVG-111 and why we believe this is a great opportunity. With our bispecific one, bispecific one targets CD3 and the other one,
1 minute left.
The tumor-associated ROR1. MVG-111 is a next generation T-cell engager and has dual mode of action, namely T-cell mediated killing of cancer cells and direct inhibition of tumor growth via blocking of WNT5 signaling. So let's focus on this ROR1 target. That mentioned is a cell-specific antigen that is upregulated on cancer cell and cancer stem cells. So you can see a list of cancer where expression of ROR1 has been shown, including this percentage rate. So there are many prevalent cancers that have ROR1 expression, making it a very interesting target. And so we in the left-hand side of the slide, you can see our pipeline in which we have already 6 patients for the 2 indications in phase 1 studies.
Magda, time's up. Okay. Sorry that I have to cut you off. Let's move on to the quick Q&A. We've got questions for Magda.
I had a quick question, Magda.
Go ahead, Oliver.
I cannot stop sharing, sorry. Let me...
If you can't do that, I'm sure Petra could help you out with it. Yeah.
I was just curious. I saw that last slide. As you think about clinical indication opportunities, it said that ROR1 was not expressed in high amounts in adult tissue. I was just curious, should we think of that as a kind of population, of younger population that would be relevant for these types of treatments, or how that manifested in terms of clinical indications you might pursue?
So we are looking at cancer in which the ROR1 is highly expressed, and we have found that, you know, in the slide you have the list of these cancers. We have both hematological and cancers and also solid tumors. Of course, our first indication are the hematological ones because we feel the proof of concept is easier to be done in these indications. And for instance, for CLL or MCL, mantle cell lymphoma, the population is the older one, but of course we are looking at targeting solid tumors in which we can go to pediatric indications too.
Right. Any other questions? Okay. In which case, let's move on to the next pitch. So next up is Alan Roth, Chief Executive Officer at Oxford Drug Design. So,
for drug design, we discover and develop innovative therapeutics against cancer based on a highly differentiated discovery platform consisting of 2 distinct core competencies. Firstly, we have world-leading expertise in the versatilins and family tRNA synthetases as targets. Alongside that, our second core competence is in pioneering AI and machine learning that help accelerate our chemistry and biology. And this is the technology with which we spun out of Oxford University. This world-leading combination leads to new mechanisms of action and novel chemical scaffolds. And importantly, our platform has been validated. We have furthermore received over $8 million thus far from leading granting agencies internationally. And following this success, we're now growing our pipeline oncology with a Series A of $20 million for a 30-month runway. We're splitting for $12 million for the first 18 months, along success-based for the remaining 8 in the other 12 months. Our pipeline is focused on anti-cancer drugs, squarely with tRNA synthetases as targets, 3 initial indications in colorectal, endocrine, and non-small cell lung. Currently active are 2 highly innovative programs in infectious disease used to validate our discovery platform. And both of these are slanted for monetization via out-licensing in the coming 12 to 24 months. Both validation programs, each groundbreaking in their respective infectious disease area, demonstrate the power and versatility of our drug discovery platform. Our first core competence, again, is synthetases, and this is a strong world-class differentiator. It includes extensive chemistry, biochemistry, and importantly, structural biology of the enzyme family. This expertise is especially powerful because different members of the family are involved in major diseases with unmet need. And this has started to be validated in oncology. The expertise allows us to efficiently deploy our platform also to many other diseases with unmet need, including fibrosis, inflammation, and aging. We then have a second core competence, which powerfully works symbiotically with our target enzyme expertise. This is our pioneering AI and computational capability, which enables faster and more accurate molecule selection on the chemistry side, plus higher predictability of our biology work. Here is a sample of the number of diseases, in addition to cancer, that are affected by different members of the tRNA synthetase family. Therefore, our platform is very efficiently expandable beyond oncology. For our oncology efforts, we're using tRNA synthetase as target, and we'll work on what is known as the mTORC1 pathway. This is a new mechanism of action, however, against a clinically validated target. It's just that our highly innovative approach aims to have clear superiority over existing treatments, a first-in-class against synthetases. This approach has been endorsed by the leading scientists in tRNA synthetase research worldwide. We will hit the ground running on our oncology work. We have over 2,000 proprietary compounds with 3 distinct chemical scaffolds, all with extensive patent prosecution. They have been either approved or published or have been filed very smoothly. These compounds are again synthetases that we made over our platform validation phase and are all ready to be profiled against different cancer tissues. Our initial computational experiments
1 minute to go.
Show good complementarity starting points between our ligands and the enzyme. This effort requires a highly experienced team, as you can see, coming all from successful careers in major pharma and emerging biotech, and includes a successful development of FDA-approved anti-cancer drugs. In summary, we've made very fast, solid progress over the past 2 years since our seed round, and are now looking forward to working with investors to significantly build up the business to the next phase. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan. Let's open the Q&A session now. Who's got the first question for Alan?
Alan, you mentioned the use of AI in your drug discovery platform. Can you talk a little bit more about how AI or machine learning is being used for the platform?
Yes, thank you, Tara. We have 2 aspects to our computational platform. The first one is a highly innovative way in which molecules are represented. The featurization aspect of AI in drug discovery is very important. And we've developed a proprietary 4-dimensional approach to describing molecules, 3 geometric and 1 electrostatic. Plus, we have added what is known as a mathematical discipline known as topology, which essentially optimizes the shape of 3-dimensional objects. Because we believe the fit of a ligand compound into an enzyme active site is a problem not just of 1 hydrogen bond here or 1 fitting of a sidechain there, but it needs to fit the whole molecule. And we have a PhD in topology, which is helping create this highly innovative approach of featurization. In addition to that, we have our second component, which is highly proprietary machine learning platform called Escape, with which we optimize the biological predictability of what the compound should do in an assay. So the molecule selection and the predictability of our compounds have allowed us to move so fast during the validation phase.
Okay, any additional questions?
Alan, has anyone managed to drug a tRNA synthetase so far? And how it's a family of enzymes, and if you could also briefly tell us about, you know, how diverse they are, or on the contrary, how, you know, how much homology you see across the different subfamilies. That would be interesting.
So a couple of questions in that. The first answer is yes. It goes back to the 80s when mupirocin, which is a topical treatment for skin infections, which has tRNA synthetase as target. So the class has been validated as targets for drugs for a very long time. However, we've come a very, very long way since then. And just to give you an example, in our validation program for infections, again, that product was topical. Ours is systemic against gram-negative pathogens, the most serious gram-negative pathogens. And not only is it systemic, but it's also oral. Our product against tRNA synthetases, in particular one or two members of the family, would be the first oral agent against gram-negative resistant bacteria in the market for over 40 years. And this is due to us being able to drug tRNA synthetases, but in a very, very particular way. I should mention anecdotally that GSK attempted to drug tRNA synthetases against resistant infections and failed due to choosing the wrong active site of the enzyme. We, due to our capability on our platform, have been able to choose the correct one and have able to develop a program which is superior to GSK 052. Now, the second part of your question had to do with the different members of the family. These are highly specific enzymes. As a matter of fact, there is approximately one member per amino acid because the main function is to insert that amino acid into the chain. So there's the leucile, the prolyl, and all the way up to the 20. And they recognize, of course, very specifically that particular amino acid to insert. What's important is that these enzymes have developed known as non-canonical functions that have nothing to do with protein making. And this is where the disease mechanisms come in which we are innovatively drugging. So we benefit from the specificity and also from the versatility of these enzymes in different biological and disease mechanisms.
All right.
Happy to tell you more.
Yeah, very, very interesting.
Thank you, Alan. Now let's move on. Last but very much not least, Kevin Dhaliwal, Professor of Molecular Imaging and Healthcare Technology, who will pitch for Prothea Therapeutics.
Hi, can you see that okay? Thank you. Yeah, so I'm representing Prothea Technologies. It's a company developing interventional technologies to transform early lung cancer care. So why is that important? So lung cancer is one of the most difficult cancers to treat because it presents late, but we're on a paradigm shift where screening CT scans are coming in, liquid biopsies are coming in. We're seeing earlier patients present, but still it's very difficult to truly know that the nodules in the lungs are benign or malignant. And no truly effective drugs are on the horizon. But it is an exciting time because the solitary pulmonary nodule problem is a tsunami, but it's here. We're detecting more of them. We're doing CT scans. We're finding them. But current technologies do not allow us to have high positive or negative predictive value when we're there. So what happens? Patients see us as clinicians. We scan them. We try and take a biopsy. We send to the pathologist. We bring them into surgery. We take out tissue and it's benign. So in a large US study, 25% of samples were benign at thoracic surgery with an on-table mortality of 12%. So there's an absolute need to improve that. So what have we been working on? We're a university spin out. We've been funded for the last 10 years with about £20 million to develop minimally invasive tools that allow us to see, characterize and treat with miniaturized fiber technologies. So we go to the tumors, we see them, we characterize them, we put biopsy needles in, but we also sample them and treat them on site. And the paradigm of removing open surgery. So the cornerstone of this is image capture, image processing, microfibers, miniaturized disposable fibers made from telecommunications materials, so they're disposable, single use. They fit down any endoscope that's accessible and let us go further than we've gone before. And then we capture those signals with proprietary software and characterize lesions. So we're seeing the tumors. We're not biopsying in the blind anymore, and we can treat on site. So in some respects, it's personalized therapy for abnormal tissues. And so what we do is we start seeing the tumors, and this is images of intensity on the left of the structure of microscopic lung. On the right, what we're seeing is lifetime fluorescence imaging of FAD, NAD, pH, and metabolic signatures coming in front of our eyes to say this is cancer or not cancer, or highly malignant. That gives us the confidence to take a good biopsy, but also to treat on site. So in terms of how does the procedure play out? So what we'd want to do is we will be navigating to lesions, and we do that anyway with standard tools that exist. And in developed countries, robotics is coming, but in non-developed countries or developing countries where lung cancer and early lung cancers now cause massive problems of presenting, there are established navigation tools that get us close. But what we will do, we will get closer. We will develop malignancy risk calculators that allow us to do that intervention on site, not bring the patient back, not send the sample to pathology, and pathology saying, you didn't get the lesion, we don't know what it is. So it's a vision for a single visit biopsy and treat for early cancers, omitting pathology in the future, and countries where they don't have developed surgical platforms. This is a paradigm shift to something that's badly needed. And it's got multiple applications throughout the human body. We're focusing on the lung initially as the biggest challenge, and because we're pulmonary doctors. We have an experienced commercial and scientific team. It's been led by a former CEO of the Smith & Nephew Endoscopy, Dr. Peter Stratford, who's head of the Scientific Advisory Board, was formerly CTO
1 minute to go.
British Technology Group with interventional medicine. Myself, I'm a practicing clinician, interventionalist, and I partner with engineers and physical scientists across the UK. The value and vision, we're looking for 2 million as a seed round to get going, to flip out the university, but really to then deliver clinical data this year. We have an MHRA green light to do the phase 1 study now, and it's going. We'll redefine tumour therapy and democratise early intervention, taking a £25,000 surgical pathway, 3 months, down to 30 minutes and sub 1K. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Kevin. Let's open the Q&A. Who's got questions for Kevin?
Kevin, great to see the progress and the work here in an important field. Thanks for the presentation. Curious if you could describe the kind of regulatory pathway as you go from a diagnostic into that future vision of kind of on-site therapy, and maybe if there's any differences between your EU strategy and the US on that front.
So for the characterization, Oliver, so it's a risk stratifying rather than diagnosis. So we're not going for a diagnostic claim because that requires a higher burden of evidence. But we have risk stratifiers already. So we're following a predicate pathway for the characterization tool for a 510K in the US. And for ablation, for the ablation pathway, we're following an established pathway for predicates as well. So I think that from a clinical perspective, we already have patients coming with a priori risk. And what we're offering them is a risk calculator on table, Oliver. So I think in terms of the regulatory hurdles and burdens for interhumans, MHRA, FDA, we've had those consults, we can follow predicates. And the key is around the diagnostic claim. It's better for us not to make a diagnostic claim, Oliver, and get it into the hands of clinicians and take it forward that way.
Any other questions?
And can you talk a little bit about the way you are able to do that risk prediction for malignancy? Do you have those models built? And could that actually be used with traditional bronchoscopy and not the device that you're developing?
Yeah, so we're using fluorescence lifetime imaging, autofluorescence, fluorescence lifetime, and it's a well-established technique outside the body. But outside the body, it takes hours because the amount of data. What we've developed is the ability to do that on the fly with the software and the essentially pseudo coloring and the stratification tool. So it can be used outside the body. So the example being, when a tissue is taken out, we can also put the fiber on the tissue outside and say, did you take malignant tissue or not? You could go back in again if that's the question. So we could do this ex vivo and in vivo.
Any additional questions? All right, in which case that concludes the pitch sessions for today. I would like to thank each and every one of the presenters today, as well as the panelists who are in for a discussion that will be led by Jim. So without further ado, I'm gonna hand over to Jim now.
Wonderful. Well, thanks very much, Kalyan. I really appreciate your leadership there, and fascinating to hear from the sort of the entrepreneurs some of the really exciting sort of technologies and approaches to what is a very serious problem. So I think one of the things I found really interesting when I looked at some of the data was the US government ran some analysis, and they said that by improving life expectancy just on cancer over the past 20 or so years was worth about $20 trillion to the US economy just through, you know, fundamentally more improvement. So this is a really important issue. Obviously, everyone's been through the pandemic. And I suppose what I was interested in seeing was from the bottom up, the entrepreneurs taking their experience either from universities and from commercial works at corporations and seeing what they were interested in trying to solve around personalized medicine and or oncology. And then I wanted to then see from the investors and from the corporates we have as judges, what they're seeing from a top down. What are the areas or issues that they think will be important in these topics? What are the sort of gaps or areas that they think could be solved? So perhaps I'll just ask a little bit more of introductions from the investors we've got here, just to explain a bit more about themselves and the corporations or their firms that they represent. And then we'll start to open the conversation back from their point of view. What are the sorts of areas that they really see as important in this topic? I'll start just on my screen. It's top right will be Tara. So Tara, perhaps if you want to sort of give a little bit more of your background and say a little bit more about Black Opal as a VC firm.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity, Jim, and great presentations by the entrepreneurs. Excited to see all this amazing work. Just a brief intro on Black Opal Ventures. We are a venture capital fund that invests in early phase companies at the collision of healthcare and technology. Less focused on pure life sciences, but very focused on the ability of artificial intelligence, advanced technologies to really transform healthcare. We bring a background in healthcare and in venture capital. I'm a physician with a 20-year career in the healthcare world in the US. So thanks for inviting me today.
Great, thanks very much, Tara. Then next one down is Lizzie Lee on my screen here. So Lizzie, a little bit.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. McKesson Ventures is a corporate VC, the arm of McKesson Corporation. We are focused mostly in oncology, life sciences, and the future of retail, anywhere that would be the extension of McKesson Corporation's enterprise strategy, looking 5 to 10 years out. Usually more on the commercial side of things than on the pure clinical, given McKesson's role in the ecosystem. Personally, I've spent the past decade in healthcare life sciences, consulting, strategy, business development, and now working in ventures.
Wonderful. Thanks, Lizzie. Appreciate you joining. Swing over left, Oliver from Intuitive.
Hi, everyone, and thanks, Jim and Cal and all the entrepreneurs for the opportunity today. I'm Oliver Keogh, Managing Director of Intuitive Ventures. We're the venture arm of Intuitive Surgical, which many will know has been a pioneer in the field of surgical robotics over the last 25 years, spanning products such as Da Vinci, but also more recently into the world of diagnostics with our pulmonary-focused robotic ion platform. Our goal as the venture firm is really focused on ecosystem, identifying transformative technologies, teams, business models that are pushing the minimally invasive care vision forward beyond the scope of where Intuitive is today. And we're typically investing up to $5 million in early stage companies across digital health and the world of what we describe as focal therapeutics, which could include devices or more biotech type opportunities. and the world of diagnostics. So certainly a lot of relevant companies today that fit into our thesis and view of the world. I'm a MD by background, originally from the United Kingdom, and was at GCV Ventures prior to joining Intuitive.
Okay, thanks, Oliver. Swing down, David from Merck.
Hi there. So Dave Stevenson with Merck's Global Health Innovation Fund. I should note we do have a venture fund that does the traditional biotech stuff. That's not us. We focus on digital health. I've been doing that for the last 13 years. Heavy strategy background before that, but given the last 13 years, it almost seems irrelevant to go beyond that. Look, so we're a corporate as well, and we're interested in ecosystem development, similar to how Intuitive's looking at it. I would say there's two areas we're really primarily interested in. One is anything that helps pharma companies discover, develop, commercialize our products more effectively. So those are technologies we're always interested in. And then things that help our customers. So how can we really improve access to care, get more patients who are underdiagnosed, not getting the care they need into the system, and how do we get them to better outcomes? Not surprisingly, most of the technologies we look at are in the sort of data, mobile, digital health arena. So many interesting things happening in that confluence of space that we really have no shortage of areas we're looking to invest at this point. But Merck's primary areas, as you would expect, would be oncology, but also immunology, neurology, and vaccines.
Thanks, Dave. And Alithia from UCB.
Yep. So UCB Ventures is a corporate venture arm of UCB Biopharma, a company that you may know it, big footprint in neurology and immunology, traditionally focused on small molecules and biologics. And our strategic mandate is really to go outside of the comfort zone of the parent company, and we search a lot for novel therapeutic modalities. So as such, we do a lot of technology platforms. We're very active in cell and gene therapy, for instance, and we also active on the digital health side of things. We started with fund-of-fund investments, but that may change as we focus more on digital therapeutics in 2022, 2023 potentially. And yeah, so that's about what we do, and it's a lot of seed and Series A types of investments. And my background, I'm a biologist by training, moved into BD at Merck Serono, then was in the US in BD with the same company and transitioned to corporate ventures. I was with M Ventures before and with UCB since 2019.
Thank you very much for being able to join, and obviously happy if any of the entrepreneurs have particular questions for you guys. But I suppose if I take that sort of top-down point of view where you guys are coming from in terms of corporates or venture investors, things that you think will deliver the sort of best financial and or strategic returns, what areas do you think around the sort of personalized medicine and oncology space are the most exciting? Is it very much from the sort of predictive side of things, the sort of use of AI or use of sort of new tools to be able to identify treatments early, the cancers early, or is it very much slightly later stage, being able to personalize existing drugs down and make them more relevant, more effective for the patients once they have been diagnosed? Is there any sort of feeling on that particular starting point, or what areas do you think this would be a great underexplored area for the entrepreneurs to be really looking for, and if it was, it would really meet your needs? Perhaps I'll start with you, Dave, given you chair the Global Health Council. What's your sort of overall view?
Look, so there's a lot of interesting stuff going on, and maybe the easiest answer is all of the above. Not to be evasive at all. I think we take a much bigger picture here, right? I think there's a lot of really interesting areas for entrepreneurs to look. I think many of the things we saw today are quite interesting. The hard part of healthcare obviously is there are interesting little pieces that pop up, but then to scale, it has to plug into everything else: workflow, reimbursement, et cetera. You know, when we look at the big picture, though, I think what we're most excited about is the data that a lot of these technologies enable, right? So the front end of diagnosis, you mentioned AI, the back end of care management. To us, it creates a virtuous loop, right? It's a learning system that if I have better information on who got what drug or what intervention, how did they perform, if I'm monitoring that patient along and I can see who's failing therapy, it leads to the ability to sort of change dosing regimens, to identify and really make personalized medicine truly work, not just from the front end of a diagnostic, but all the way through the system. And as a drug company, that helps us with better data on how, okay, well then how do we design better drugs? So you know, I think we look at this as a 10, 15-year picture, that there's some really amazing things that are happening right now. They're going to tee up that next generation of personalized medicine that can really change healthcare. And not just make money, but also help save lives along the way.
Anyone want to chime in onto that, from sort of your different perspectives?
I would agree with that very much, Dave. I think you're right. I think there's every phase of the patient journey where there's opportunity for improvement, whether it's from prevention, diagnosis, treatment to remission and care even at the end of life. I think we've seen a great example of that spectrum of care in all the companies that presented today, and so I'm grateful to see that you can see that there's the aspect of segmenting the population and being able to potentially risk predict, or at least predict, future progression, but then have the right kinds of therapeutics that match up with those. At the end of the day, oncology, I worked for many years on both the provider and the payer side. Oncology was always, the most difficult thing to treat as a provider. And it was always the most expensive thing to pay for as a payer. And if we can start to tackle that problem, it's such an important area, but I think that entire spectrum is really critical from all phases of the patient journey.
I think we've got a question coming back from Dharmesh. I think you can certainly reference back this idea of getting the information and almost being able to work for the drug development side as well. I'll be super interested if that potentially could be more effective than the other. But
I was just referring back to what David said about dosage. One of the things we can do is actually measure dosage as part of our tests. So it doesn't, right now, a lot of the drugs are approved with a fixed dose. If we can reduce that dose and still get a reaction, it means that the patient is suffering less with side effects. And that's one of the things we can do with our tests. The other thing was going back to that data. So what we want to do is build a cancer-taking companion app that stays with the patient throughout their journey, sees how they're reacting in the future to treatment and how they're progressing, but also log which drugs don't work, against the markers, etc., just to build that database of knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, look, certainly getting too much dose is an ongoing problem and has been since the beginning of cancer treatment, but underdosing is just as big a problem, right? There are people that can tolerate more and aren't given it because of guidelines. When you look at the future of cancer care, like the N of 1 stuff really plays out. I think, what's also equally interesting is the population side of things, right? Looking at different cohorts and looking at the bigger picture as a pharma company. I will say, look, I've been very glowing and there's a lot of opportunity. Let's be real. There's, Jim also asked the question, how do you make money? Things are very overvalued right now. There's a lot of enthusiasm that came out of the pandemic for, telecare, virtual health, anything AI. I think that as an investor, we're looking for things that we feel have differential value in that ecosystem. I think if you look at some of the things that have gotten funded over the last 2 years, it's not that they're bad, it's just they don't have that much value. But if you have a piece, and I think many of you do, if you have a piece that can plug into that ecosystem and actually make it worth something, you should do quite well.
David, if I may jump on the back of that, I think, a theme here, a lot of innovation around diagnostics, and you think about that broader care pathway opportunity. It certainly aligns to our thesis and view of the world that, you know, the future of care is minimally invasive care all the way to prevention and, you know, avoidance of disease. But I think a challenge here, but also an opportunity, is the health economics, the data, the evidence to be generated. As you think about some of these diagnostic plays, and as I said, we've heard a few here, and this goes to reimbursement ultimately and the markets in the US, being really thoughtful early on about what that evidence strategy is going to be, so that you can demonstrate that differentiated value from the life science tech that is maybe the foundation of your approach. It's an opportunity to really drive value. It's no small feat, and you know, it's, as we think about some of the fundraisers that we've seen in the diagnostic space, some of these studies do need to be huge. They need to be powered at a scale, but I think that is the bar in many of these cases to demonstrate that value. And so certainly when we look at early stage companies, it's a recognition of what are the building blocks, that bigger evidence strategy that will be needed to move the needle in some of these clinical areas.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Oliver. I did see as if you raised your hand before. Have you still got a question?
Oh, it was not so much. I was just going to congratulate all of you who do oncology, because you guys are way ahead of other fields. And I mean, we're first in the block in pregnancy area. We're doing stratified medicine, but you know, in terms of oncology is where I used to know Judah Falkman, the late Judah Falkman. Judah used to say, if you're a mouse and you got cancer, we can cure you. And now, you know, thanks to the work that you all have been doing and you've been funding, many cancers are. I know my own father-in-law had colorectal cancer, and you know, he got sorted. And so what I'm just saying, that there's a lot you have done. So I just want to thank you, both the investors and the researchers. That's all.
That's really kind of you. That's very thoughtful. Lizzie, Alithia, perhaps sort of turn to you from your perspectives at McKesson and UCB. How are you seeing the sort of top-down picture? Where do you see some of the sort of personalization becoming important from, you know, from the sort of, you know, from the patient point of views, as well as the small molecule pieces? I'll start with you, Lizzie. Sure.
I mean, for us at McKesson, one of the biggest areas for our growth trajectory is oncology care. We own and operate US oncology clinics all across the country. And a place that they're trying to really figure out is how can you take some of these innovative new therapies and monitoring methods and apply them for the end of the cancer care and survivorship journey. So to Dave's point, a lot of what we focus on is digital health. But when you think about the monitoring of, you know, the tumor type over time, and if you see recurrence, how can you put that back into the doctor's workflow, into the care team's journey, both in the oncology setting and in that primary care setting of that patient throughout the rest of their life after they've undergone cancer care. So I think that sort of emphasis on monitoring and surveillance is something that we're really interested in.
Interesting. Okay, that's really helpful. Alicia, what about
you? Yeah, coming from a company that is, you know, traditionally not in oncology, we still see precision medicine as, you know, really, really important. And actually, we can leverage a lot of the learnings from oncology towards those therapeutic area. And if you think about neuroscience, that has been extremely challenging, we are really now moving towards much better precision medicines approach. And you know, being very active in epilepsy now, we don't see epilepsy as, you know, one disease. It is like, you know, lots of different subgroups. And obviously gene therapy here is a fantastic new tool. The challenge we'll always have is to get some of the more costly approaches and to make them commercially viable and at the right price, so we actually get it to patients. So it's all going to be about, you know, finding that balance and making it work. But over time we should make it work. So I'm pretty optimistic there.
Okay, it's great. And then maybe if I could sort of pick up on something that Dave referenced about the importance of bringing things into the existing sort of value chain as well, making sure it can work with, you know, the existing providers. I mean, as we look at some of the data that Kellyanne showed earlier, you know, we see a lot of almost technology companies coming in that can use their sort of prowess around machine learning, AI, or some of the sort of genomics platforming and sequencing to almost say we can target different areas in slightly different ways to make things more precise. They might be a company like Apple or like Amazon that understands, from a very big picture on the data side of things. How much do you think, as you all look at this area, whether from an entrepreneur's point of view or from an investor's point of view, the importance going forward will be this combination of the sort of clinical understanding of, the bodies, the treatments, the existing system, but actually to make the real difference, the real game change, as Dave would say, will actually come from bringing in some of the sort of outside players that maybe bring, the sort of some of more the technology and understanding of what could be achieved if we brought some of the AI. I'm just interested if it's going to be this combination that will be significant to make these real breakthroughs.
Look, so I'm happy to answer it. I'm not popular in Silicon Valley, so take it for what it's worth. No, look, so I do think that it's the combination, right? I am always dubious of some of the tech companies just from a mindset perspective, and it's not to be too dismissive. Some of them have made really excellent hires. There's some really good talent from the healthcare side of the field, but the bottom line is, to us, it starts and stops with clinical. You have to approach it from a clinical data mindset, the way regulators think, the way healthcare providers think. If you're not coming from that side of the equation, I think you really struggle, because it has to be relevant to a patient, and you can't let your customers fix your product for you, which is the traditional tech mindset. So again, I don't mean to be too dismissive. It will be the combination of technology plus clinical that will ultimately carry the day. And I do think there's a big role for the tech players. I will be stunned if one of the big, advances comes specifically out of one of the tech players by themselves. I don't want to get too much into the dirt on some of my experience in that space.
Yeah, we completely agree.
And for full disclosure,
thinks of it as
McKesson is a great partner of ours. I've known Dave Schulte and Tom Rogers forever. Yeah. I've known Erica at UCB forever. So I think we're probably a little biased here, but take it for what it's worth.
Yeah, I mean, our opinion is similar. We think it's sort of the age of integration between large incumbent players in the healthcare space, startups that have the novel vision and healthcare background experience, and the use of technology that may be driven by some of the engineering in Silicon Valley. So you really need all three aspects of that to make something really sing. So fully aligned with Dave's perspective.
Yeah, I also agree with Lizzie and Dave on this, and I think it's interesting. Kevin, your company is very much, it seems like a visual AI kind of company, right? And I think that's some interesting examples of really great technology coming in the visual AI space. And I think as investors, we have to think about how do you actually get that to the customer and develop value for that customer. So this eye on really, how do you develop a value proposition that makes sense for the customer you're selling to, in addition to how do you then integrate, right? And you may have a great value proposition, but boy, it's hard to integrate into healthcare. So these are all things that I think the tech world, whether it's enterprise or startups, needs to think about as we move forward.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Tara. I'm mindful we're coming to the sort of top of the hour, and I'm pretty conscious for those on the west coast of the US, it's the start of your day. For those more in Europe, particularly in Belgium and places like that, it's more the end of your day. So I don't want to overstay our welcome. So perhaps we'll allow everyone to sort of to sort of enjoy the rest of the day as appropriate. But I wanted to say thank you, obviously, again to the DIT, Department for International Trade, for Bob and Paul in particular for organising these wonderful entrepreneurs. My special thanks, obviously, to all the investors for being able to spare the time and share their insights on that side. And thank you once again. This has been recorded, so it will be shared and others will enjoy it afterwards. as they be able to sort of hook in, and it will form the basis of some of the work we're doing with the UK government for the reports as well. So thanks once again to you all. Enjoy the rest of your day.